Hello and welcome back to the Helmet Head podcast, and I've got one of those ones where we're going to reminisce back down memory lane in this episode, because the end of the 90s for me was very much the poster time for motorcycles. In my room was always a poster of a 90s sports bike. Now everybody back then dreamt about owning some of the bigger ones, but for me it was the 600, especially the 600cc range, that were my favourite. They were my sweet spot. They were the ones that I wanted to own. So as soon as I was old enough, one of the things I did was I owned all four of the bikes I wanted, basically in order. So when I was younger, the first one I had pinned up on my actual wall was the Suzuki GSXR 600. Now the GSXR 600, it was just looked like such a big beast. It was one of those things like, I've got to get one, I've got to get one. And all the things about it on the post, it had things like the horsepower. Now the horsepower was 109 horsepower. That even in modern bikes is still an incredible amount of power at that rear wheel, an incredible amount. And so let me just go through some of the things. So, and then I'll tell you about my experience. So first of all, like I just said, it's 109 horsepower, right? It was a 6-speed box. It was the ignition. What made me laugh back then is we used to go, it's digital ignition. Okay, and then the dry weight was 174 kilograms, and its top speed was 158 miles per hour. So like I said, I've owned all of these. So when I got the Suzuki, I got on it to ride it for the first time. Obviously massive smiles, I'm ticking a dream box, and boy did it make me smile. They are very much those kind of bikes, aren't they, that it's like they are just, you turn that throttle back then on one of those, they were real, that sweet spot of power. You release that 109 horsepower and it just flew. Now what I remember about the Suzuki especially is that when I got on it, it felt really heavy. Now I jumped, I'm pretty sure back then, from 125s up to the 600. So as you can imagine, it's gonna feel big, but the one thing I always never forget was how big and solid this bike felt. But the power delivery was so smooth. It had this real deep kind of roar to the engine as well, and I'm pretty sure that one had an aftermarket can on, so the sound would just echo, and it just went so well. But I do remember feeling, do you know what, it was quite a heavy bike in my opinion in regards to the 600 sort of sports bikes. That's what it felt a big presence. So next sort of poster I put up on the wall for me was the Kawasaki ZX6R. Now especially the model I'm talking about is 1998. This is very end of the 90s. Now the ZX6R, let me just go through some of the sort of facts about it. It's 107 horsepower, again it was 6-speed, and the weight was slightly more heavier than the Suzuki at 176 kilograms. I am reading this off of a piece of paper, I've just not kept all this information in my head. Now Kawasaki's, the thing that did it for me about Kawasaki's, that Kawasaki green. It had to be, didn't it? It had to be that awesome green, that glowy kind of Kawasaki green. It looked phenomenal. And the one thing I remember about getting on the Kawasaki was, let alone that's slightly heavier, isn't it? It's 2 kilograms heavier than the Suzuki was. It didn't feel it. The Kawasaki's, to me, always felt really light and really nimble as well. And I remember again turning that throttle, and it felt to me faster. It felt like it was a faster bike in regards to like the top speed of it and the acceleration, because it felt so light. And I think that's what Kawasaki have done throughout literally the whole time past the 90s, is they've made those bikes that always feel super light and super well put together. Now I remember taking the Kawasaki on a track day and getting my knee down on it, and the smiles and the grins on my face from that bike was just absolutely incredible. And of course, like everybody else, you have to go out and buy the Kawasaki bright green one-piece racing leather suit to be part of it. Full Power Man costume, your bike's green, you're green, your lid's green, your gloves are green, it's all got a big Kawasaki green. And even when you buy yourself your like your race like fleece that you used to buy, it had to be Kawasaki racing green, didn't it? So you're basically going around as a great big green person. But I remember that bike just being, it was very special. It was a very special bike to own. Now what's quite interesting is what I moved on to next, because I moved on to, and I think this was it was very new at the time from what I remember, is they brought out the Yamaha R6, and the Yamaha R6 was almost like, randomly, was almost like a bit of a game changer. It was so popular, it was madness. Everybody was going out and buying an R6, and I was no different. I was like, I want to get my hands on a Yamaha R6. It's got to be next, and it's literally what I did. I went out and I bought, and it had to be blue. The Yamaha R6 had to be blue, and it had to be, because that was the colour that everybody had. And it looked awesome, didn't it? It had that kind of, I don't know if I'd call it electric blue, but it had that kind of blue that really kind of stood out, and again looked fantastic on a poster. Now the Yamaha has 108, they're all very similar, 108 horsepower. But what I loved about it was, right, so it weighed 169 as well kilograms. It's important because it was ridiculously light. It felt the lightest bike I'd ever ridden. It was just, it felt like you were riding a feather. And the handling, oh gosh, the handling of the R6 was incredible. You were literally throwing it round every bend, every curve. You were, I can pin this, I can get my knee on the floor. Obviously I rode it completely within the speed limit and didn't do its maximum speed of 160 miles per hour at all. 160 miles per hour from a 600cc bike. It was lightning, was the Yamaha, absolute lightning. But what was sort of always I found quite interesting was, if you rode it sensibly, like, and went for a little trip on it to, say, from where I live in the middle of the UK to, say, Wales, you could get 43 miles per gallon out of it. So it was quite an economical beast rocket missile that you were riding. But it was just awesome, and the styling of it was just delicious. It was such a cool bike. But then what came next, and this is probably a big turning point for me, as in for loving brands. Now I love all motorcycle brands, I do, but I keep coming back to a brand what's quite interesting, because the bike that I was like, do you know what, I really want to give one a go, and I was hesitant about it at first, but I had almost a bit of a love affair with this certain model. And let me explain, because next up is a bike that I ended up buying model after model of. So the Honda CBR 600 F3. That was a bike that I literally fell head over heels for. So this is the stats: 105 horsepower, so not as powerful as some of the others. Top speed 155, not as quick as the R6. The weight was heavy, 186 kilograms, but you could do a quarter of a mile in 10.9 seconds. There was something about this bike that just did it for me. I got on it, and the build quality, the weight, heavy but felt just right. It felt planted when you turn that throttle. And I just did so many trips, so many adventures on Honda CBR 600s. I love them that much that I just bought another model after another model, and if I changed to try something else, I used to come back and buy a CBR 600. And I used to love it because you could get them in Repsol racing colours. Castor oil was my favourite. I loved castor oil, the racing colours of that. I owned that bike, I've tracked that bike, I loved that bike. But the Honda, it was just, for me, it was that little cut above the rest, because I just fell for it. It's the first bike that I'm pretty sure that I just jumped on it, turned the throttle, and I just wheeled it down the road, because the confidence it gave me was huge. It really it just filled me with confidence. It rode fantastically. And now the thing of it is, out of all four of these bikes, I would love to have a perfect example in my garage. Any one of them, and to be fair, all four of them, because they were my poster bikes. And it pretty much must be the same for you guys and girls. You must be sitting there going like, yeah, there is one of them that was the perfect one. There is one that I have unbelievable memories on, and there is one that I wish I never sold. And the funny thing of it is, if I kept any of them now for what I paid back then, they're well over double the price, if not triple the price, and some of them in mint condition are extremely difficult to find. The R6s, for example, are so hard to get an absolute minter. But generally, right now, for me, if I was going to buy any of them, of course it would have to be the Honda CBR, but not the F3. What's quite interesting, because very shortly at the end of the 90s, in the beginning of the 00s, obviously they came out with the F4i. And the F4i was the one that I raced around the track on. But not just that, that's not the reason why I'm saying this. The reason why I'm saying this is the F4i was the perfect sweet spot just at the end of the 90s, but it was the perfect sweet spot at the end of the 90s. It's the beginning of the 00s. I literally, today, that bike would be the bike, if I could get one absolutely perfectly mint, low mileage, that would be my weekend blast fun. It'd be the bike I'd put in the garage, covered up majority of the time, but just something I'd want to jump on, just to remind myself of being a kid again, being young, being free, and not thinking about much in life other than riding motorcycles. What kind of hasn't really changed, has it? Because that's all I do. But that would generally be my perfect bike. Now, what I'm interested to see in the comments, what I'm really interested to see is which one's your dream bike, or is it another one from the 90s? Which one is your perfect bike? If right now you could put down any amount of cash to get the mintest, perfectest condition one, which one would it be? It's going to be an interesting read for me to see who wants what and what they want. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the podcast. Now, I'm really, of course, the main Helmet channel there, again, is so much going on in regards to that. Please go and check it out. I'm about to head back and do the next leg of the world trip, because I'm currently riding a Honda Monkey bike around the entire world. I say around the entire world is my plan. As many countries as I'm legally allowed to get into, and also store the bike in, because there's going to be some I might have to fly out and hire. Will get complicated. Now, right now, there's lots of brands contacting that channel. There's lots of awesome reviews, and especially reviews for pieces of kit that are affordable. What I quite like, instead of going for just the big expensive stuff, lots of really affordable kit, including things like auxiliary lights. If you're looking for motorcycle comms, the best budget comms for under 100. These are all products that have been sent out to me to review on the channel. And the one thing I don't do on the Helmet Head channel is, if I get a product and I'm not happy with it, I just don't release the video. Really that simple. I'll write back to them, I'll apologise, say look, I found some problems with it, I don't want to put the video out. So the stuff I put on there is stuff I would generally buy myself, what I think is really important. So please go and check out the main Helmet Head channel, of course, but this podcast, I'd be really, if you do me a great favour and hit the subscribe button. It's free to subscribe to this podcast. I'd love to get it built up so it gets to the same level, obviously, as the main channel as well, and we can keep spreading the word. And hopefully you've enjoyed this, and if you have, please click that thumbs up button, hit the bell notification as well if you want to be reminded of the next one, so you don't miss what's coming up next. But 90s bikes, I really want to go and buy one now. I really want to go and buy myself that Honda CBR and have it in the garage. I really want to do it. Oh, I wish I had all the money in the world. Anyway, I will see you in next week's podcast. Take care, ride safe, look after yourself. Bye bye for now.